home that Friday afternoon when the school bus dropped me off. Being early spring, the sun still hung up in the air and would do so well into the evening, providing enough daylight and warm weather. More importantly, this time of year meant bike riding. My friends and I could spend the weekend exploring the neighborhood and racing one another. I could pedal down the street as hard as I could, picking up speed, the breeze flowing around me as if I were flying. First, I needed to hurry home and get my dad to help put together my new bike before he went out for the night. When I got home, I flung open the door to the screened-in porch, slamming it into the scraps of car and bicycle parts piled near the front door. I pushed open the front door, threw my Ninja Turtles backpack against the oak-paneled closet, and tossed my jacket at the line of coat hooks only to have it fall to the floor. In the living room, my dad lounged in his brown duct-tape recliner watching some salacious talk show. To realize my weekend plans, I had to convince him to help me put together the bike I had gotten for Christmas. Yet I had a small window to achieve this since he'd be leaving as soon as my mom got home from work. Otherwise, being unemployed, all he did was sit in front of the TV in a near vegetative state. Back when he had been working, we spent weekends together fixing up some of the old junk that now sat adjacent to the front door. I even remember last November when we spent a chilly Saturday morning big game hunting. That weekend I had killed a deer and had become horrified at doing so just after watching its neck explode and then fall lifeless to the ground. I had hid my disgust well during the rest of the trip while also trying to revel in my father's praise. Weeks later, I had to stand by and smile when my dad recounted the kill scene by scene to my grandparents at the family Christmas party. The following morning, when I awoke to find the box containing the unassembled pieces of my bike under the tree, I vowed to overcome my previous trepidation and bag a bigger buck the following November. My dad had told me that Christmas morning that he had wanted the two of us to put the bike together before spring. The next day he returned to work to find out the factory planned to close at the end of the year. I had kept my distance then and waited for the start of spring to ask him about the bike. Today had to be the day. Dad, can we put the bike together? I yelled just 2 feet from him. He laid his head back against the headrest and sighed. Not today, tomorrow, maybe. Come on, Dad, I want to ride it today. Can't we put it together now? Did you hear what I said? Not today. But Dad, damn it, Brian, change out of your school clothes and go outside. But Dad, please, I'm the only one without a bike, and I'll be left. God damn it, did you hear what I said? Now go. Upset, I marched off to my bedroom and put on some old faded jeans and an overstretched long-sleeve shirt. When finally ready to leave, I called over to my dad, who was now in the kitchen, to tell him I was leaving for Will's. I heard him utter an okay followed by the ka-chuk of an opening beer can. I stormed out of the front door and mumbled some curse words while picking up and throwing a folded lawn chair leaning up against the wood siding. The noise of it crashing against the pile of junk, one which included the stripped-down frame of my old bike, on the front porch had been too quiet for my dad to hear. After a minute more of a meaningless fit, I walked the 2 streets over to see my friend Will. Along the way, I kept my eyes on the ground, kicking whatever loose stones and pebbles that came into view. I found Will in the front yard playing with a Jack Russell Terrier his parents had gotten him after his brother had left. The two took turns chasing one another and wrestling in the grass. Will laughed while the dog barked and yipped in excitement. Will's yard was fenced in with an adjacent driveway full of cratered dirt that would turn into tiny lakes in a mild rain. The ugly yellow shade of paint on his house was worn down and discolored. Around this time of year, his family would put up Easter egg decorations in the windows. This year, all they had in the upper left corner of the main window was a red-bordered flag with a small blue star inside a white rectangle. When I first saw it, I asked Will what it meant. He told me it was for his brother. Deciding to head over to Jason's, we left the dog in the fenced-in yard and walked away as it howled after us. Jason lived a street over from Will. A year older than us, he went to the middle school across town and would brag about having sex with girls the two of us had never met and, as far as we knew, may not have actually existed. On the way, we talked about whether either one of our parents would take us to Six Flags this summer. They'll take me anywhere I want to go, Will told me. They'd also buy me anything right now. Really? That's awesome. I regretted those words after seeing Will look downwards. I don't even want to ask them, he said, eyes still on the ground. He was an inch taller than I and had sandy blonde hair. The 6th grade girls were always making eyes towards him. I try not to talk about anything around them, Will then said. Have you heard from your brother? I asked. He called 2 days ago. He's outside Baghdad. Oh, I said as I knocked on Jason's door. Jason's house had clean, white aluminum siding and a lawn which his dad had worked diligently to maintain. A contractor, he spent Fridays and weekends restoring a street rod he kept in a 2-car garage. Jason's mother answered the door, dressed in a sweatshirt and capri pants that reminded me a lot of Mary Tyler Moore on the Dick Van Dyke Show. I had watched a lot of old TV shows with my mom. She told us he was in the living room and then yelled out to him to announce our presence and to also tell him he had 10 minutes to finish his game before Oprah started. We found Jason playing the new Xbox he had gotten for Christmas. I had only played it a few times but really looked forward to playing it again, except that Jason would only let us play the 2-player games in which he could easily beat us. Jason now played a modern warfare game where he dodged bullets and avoided shrapnel by ducking behind barriers. Will had looked a little uneasy when witnessing 3 soldiers die in an explosion that left a pile of mostly blood and guts in the middle of an empty street. A minute or so afterwards, Jason saved his game and we went outside. Since I had no bike to ride, we had to put off exploring the neighborhood for at least another day or even a week. I hoped it was only one more day. Once outside, Jason suggested we go to the local high school and get a game of football going. I, worried that there might be older kids there who could break my bones, had to find something else for us to do, so I suggested to them, shoot some hoops before your dad gets home and parks his car in the driveway. We can go later. Alright, but after that we're going to the school. Come with us or go home. In the middle of our second game of 21, Jason's dad rolled into the driveway in his brand new Blazer. Because he kept the hot rod he spent his weekends working on in the shed, he had to park in front of the garage door. That ended our game. Jason's dad had a gruff voice, and when the above-ground pool opened in the summer, you could see his big biceps and his army tattoos. Jason had always told us his dad could beat up both of our dads. He looked at me when he said it, mostly, with a smug grin. He thought of my dad as some shiftless drunk who bitched about his problems all day. But my dad had told me about the many fights he had been in and won. He once told me about how he was the smallest kid in high school and how it had forced him to gain a reputation as a tough guy in order to survive. He then told me to do the same. Damn it, son, Jason's dad said as he looked over to the front of the house. The trash bin has been on the curb since this morning's pickup. Take care of it. I'll get it later. I got friends over now. Don't give me a smart-ass attitude when I tell you to do something. Just go and do it, or you can say goodbye to your friends. Alright, I'll do it, Jason said, walking away in exaggerated frustration. Hey, Will, his dad said, turning to us. You heard anything from your brother? We got a letter a couple days ago. It said he was okay. Will's brother had enlisted a year earlier. Although 8 years older, he let us hang around him when none of his high school friends were around. He played sports with us, the 3 of us against him, of course, and talked to us like adults, never shying away from subjects our parents avoided around us. Though he called his family whenever he could, no one really knew where he was or what he was doing at any given moment. Don't worry, Jason's dad said. He'll be home soon. I know it. After Jason took care of the trash bin, he suggested again that we go to the local high school and toss around the football. I thought of reasons for us not to go because I worried some of the older kids we might run into would run all over me, crush me, and break my bones. I also wanted to avoid the looks I got if I suggested we play two-hand touch. In the end, I said nothing and just went along nervously. The closest school had been a Catholic high school 3 blocks away, and I was relieved to find no other kids around. We had an hour or so before it started to get dark, so we tossed around the ball, running passing routes with each one taking turns at being quarterback. When it had been my turn to go out for a pass, Jason played defense. I leaped up to get the high throw from Will, only to have Jason, being a year older and a few inches taller, smack the ball out of my hands. In doing so, he knocked me over and I fell on my back. Momentarily winded and unable to move, I heard them shout over to me phrases like, "Get up, loser. Don't be such a pussy, Brian." We had been playing for a few minutes more when we heard voices coming our way. 3 girls, 2 black and 1 white, walked towards us talking amongst themselves. The white girl, the taller and the heftier of the 3, sounded as if she were persuading the other 2 to follow her. "We'll play you," she said. "What? You 3 against us? Seriously?" "Yeah, dumbass. Who else you think we're talking to?" "All right, then," Jason said. "Just don't cry when you get hurt." "Whatever." Jason let them have the ball, saying ladies first. Before we began, the girls asked us our names and we asked the same of them. The smallest of the girls, Christina, had been the darkest skinned and was the skinniest of the 3, with her hair done up in cornrows. She had also had on faded blue jeans and a Hello Kitty t-shirt. Second tallest of the girls, Aisha, was caramel skinned and had her hair pulled back in a ponytail. White girl Gwen also had her dark blonde hair in a ponytail. Her face was covered with blackheads and her breasts were plump and big enough to be seen bouncing under her shirt when she ran. We let them have the ball first. Gwen played quarterback while the other 2 went out for passes. She had a surprisingly accurate arm, and the other girls got open long enough to make catches and advance down the field. After the smallest girl, Christina, caught a touchdown pass and ran by me, Jason chewed me out and told me to switch positions with Will. I now had to try to tackle the quarterback after counting to 5 Mississippi. When we switched to offense, I played quarterback and Gwen now had to tackle me. I was able to sidestep her and make some passes until one play when she drove me to the ground, compressing my solar plexus enough to win me. As she climbed off of me, I could feel the ends of her breasts trail along my body until she lifted off completely. I then got up slowly and limped back to the huddle. At one point in the game, Christina, the smallest of the 2, caught the ball and ran 2 steps only to have the ball slip from her grip. Will, who had been in pursuit, jumped on the loose ball and she jumped on top of him. They struggled for possession for 10 seconds, both laughing and rolling around. Then the laughter altogether stopped and suddenly Will let go of the ball and rolled off to the side. She sat up, ball protected in both arms, and stared over to him. Will stood up and hobbled over to where we stood, both his hands just over the crotch of his jeans. "You all right?" I asked. "What the hell you asking him that for?" Jason said, then turning to Will, "What the hell is wrong with you? Letting that little girl take the ball. We better not lose." Will ignored him, looking over to the girls who giggled together some 10 feet from us. When he faced them, Christina dropped her smile and stared at him with some concern. "I don't want to play anymore," Will said, walking away. "Hey," Gwen yelled over to us as we were trying to coax Will to stay. "Come hang with us." "What about the game?" Jason yelled after them as they walked away from us. "You lose if you walk away. Nobody cares about your stupid little game," Aisha yelled before turning around and walking away with the other girls. After getting Will to go along, we followed them to the back of the school to an adjacent church that led out to a landscaped parsonage, a place I had never been to nor had even known existed. In the center of the garden area stood a large grotto whose steps led up to a life-size statue of the Virgin Mary. Her eyes faced downward, and even though she had been made to appear static, or either in the act of appearing or ascending, I had thought then that the figure looked a little sad. Gwen sat down at one of the benches 20 yards away from the statue and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. "Cool place, huh?" "Sure, whatever," Jason said, flipping the ball around in his hands. "Come on," Gwen said, holding up a small bottle of gin. "Got some old man to buy it for me." She took a sip, then passed it to Jason, who likewise took a sip, then passed it on to me. I pretended to take a sip, holding it up to my closed lips while thinking of my dad slumped down in his easy chair with his feet up. I then passed it to Will, who had been looking at Christina up until then. He took a noticeably big swig and, hiding his revulsion at the taste, passed the bottle to her. She passed it along without taking a sip. "You see that over there?" Gwen said, pointing to the statue of the Virgin Mary. "Yeah, so? It's a statue," Jason said. "Ain't just a statue," Aisha said. "It's weird. A lot of crazy stuff happens." "What?" Jason said, giving her an incredulous smirk. "It can predict the future." "Bullshit," Jason repeated. "If you stare at its eyes for a long time, you can see your future in them." "That's just idiotic," Jason said. Intrigued and wanting to hear more of the story, I kept quiet during the explanation. Will also remained quiet, only staring at Christina, who tried her best not to look back at him. "Think so, huh?" Gwen said. "I had a friend who knew some people who saw it in their dreams. Woke up the next day to find out someone in their family died." Whatever, Jason said, continued to argue with the girls. Why don't you go over there? All you got to do is stare in its eyes, Aisha said. If you do it, you might see your future. I'm not doing that. Scared, huh? Hell no, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. As Jason continued to argue, Will snatched away the bottle and took another swig, then handed it to Jason. Eyes fixed ahead, he walked over to the statue. Look into its eyes and ask your question, Gwen shouted after him as he neared it. Though life-size, the statue stood on a 3-foot pedestal, and it caused it to tower over Will by at least 3 feet, so he had to tilt his head upward in order to make eye contact with it. The darkening tint from the setting sun made everything appear eerier than it had if it had been completely dark. After 30 seconds of staring into its eyes, Will finally asked his question. The rest of us stood around watching in quiet expectation, unable to hear what he had said. During this time, Gwen had moved closer to Jason, who had never taken his eyes off of Will. At the moment she was about to put her arm around Jason's shoulder, Will backed away from the statue, stumbling. He hurried back over to us, doing his best to hide his distress. What did you see? I asked him. Let's just go. Okay then, but what happened? I asked, awaiting an explanation. Nothing. I just got dizzy. Let's just go. What? Jason said, a mischievous grin widening to both cheeks. Did the statue show you your new boyfriend? God damn it, I'm going, he said, starting off for home. We followed after him, ignoring the chatter and the laughter from the girls behind us. After having caught up with him, we tried getting him to explain what had happened with the statue. Curious, I may have crossed the line when I asked him, Did you see something happening to your... Shut up, he said, walking faster to catch up to Jason. I lagged a few feet behind, still trying to figure it all out. Each one of our parents wanted us home by 7:30. The year before, they had relied on Will's brother to come get us and walk each one of us home. We knew there'd be no one to walk us home this night or any of the nights to come. Jason, being in middle school, eased their minds just a bit, and each of our parents must have believed that we lived far away enough from anything really dangerous. Now Will's brother was like one of those soldiers you controlled in those realistic video games. In desert fatigues, dodging bullets and shells during an intense firefight, maybe the more skilled you were, the more likely you were to survive. His brother had been pretty athletic, and I remember back to a time when we had spent half an hour running after him until finally giving up the game without any success. I remembered watching his arm muscles flex with each completion of a stride. He looked unbeatable, and I hoped that was the case. Will, I said, calling over to him, how long does your brother have left in Iraq? Why you ask? Will said, turning around to look at me. Just wondering, do you think what are you trying to say? You don't believe that garbage, do you? No, I was just wondering, why don't you just grow up? Will said, his tone of voice sounding harsher and frustrated. I didn't, you just shut up about it. I almost spoke up to defend myself, but caught Will's scorching glare of displeasure. I stayed quiet as Jason steered the subject to the girls we had met, sizing each one of them up in terms of looks and body parts. He asked Will, you think you could do it with that black girl? I really, Will said, looking around with some agitation. What, are you really gay or something? Jason said with a surprised laugh. No, I just don't like talking about that kind of thing. Probably wouldn't know what to do with a girl like that anyway, Jason said, putting his arm around his shoulders. Then bragged about a sexual conquest with some middle school girl, and I listened to him dubiously, yet intrigued at the details he gave about his experiences. Anyway, could be worse. You could be missing a dick like Brian. Whatever, mine's bigger than yours, I fired back. We were joking around when we finally reached a point where we parted from Jason. Will and I continued on walking home, looking about us, taking in the ambiance of the beautiful and peaceful night. You ever think of leaving here and going away? Will said, breaking the silence. Like where? I don't know. Just someplace. Yeah, everybody does. Why are you bringing this up? I was wondering about it, he said as he looked at his house, which was now only 2 houses away. Do you think that's why my brother left? I tried to think of an answer, but I was unaware myself. We walked to his house without saying anything else. His dog began barking before it recognized him. He then whipped his little tail back and forth as he ran alongside us from behind the fence. The two of us parted at the driveway, and I continued on to my house. I walked in around 7 and went to my room, at my mom's assistance to change out of my dirty clothes. She microwaved some slices of pizza she had picked up on her way home and set them on the counter before returning to her game of spider solitaire. Next to her elbow was a plate full of uneaten pizza crust and an ashtray. My dad had been getting ready to go out with some friends, and he wouldn't be home until late, if at all. 10 minutes later, he left without saying a word to my mom, who only sighed loudly as he closed the door behind him, even though her eyes never left the computer screen. Most likely, he'd spend the night at a friend's house, too drunk to make it safely home. Once, just after the war started, he had come home drunk, boasting in a loud voice about how those Iraqis were going to pay for what they had done. He had gotten so loud, my mom tried her best to quiet him down. Eventually, he passed out in the middle of the kitchen after singing a college fight song he mistook for the national anthem. I took the pizza slices into the living room and watched TV where I'd spend the rest of the night. I thought about that Virgin Mary statue and wondered why I didn't try to ask it about my future. Maybe it could have told me when my bike would be ready and possibly when my dad would find another job. I then thought about what it would be like if he got a really nice job, and also what it would be like to vacation any place we wanted. But before falling asleep, I imagined standing with my parents in front of the enchanted castle at Disney World, like I'd seen many families on TV do. I had an odd dream that night, most of which I had forgotten about just after dreaming it. The part I remembered took place in front of my house, which now had the grotto where the front porch door should have been. Instead of being just a statue, it now had a fount surrounding it. When I approached it, I glanced downward at the fount and the heavy blue dyed liquid it contained. It looked a little like water, but clearly wasn't. My eyes moved from the fount and scaled the Virgin Mary, starting with the feet, all the while moving my head upwards as if not in control of my own body. I feared the message from her eyes, yet my eyes still ascended slowly as if compelled to reach hers. This scroll upwards seemed to have taken hours. Just when I was about to meet her eyes and discover the prophecy, I spun around suddenly. Will's brother had been behind me. Dressed in his desert fatigues, he did not move, only remained expressionless as he stared at me. After what seemed a significant amount of time, his lips parted to reveal a sardonic grin on his freckled face. He then laughed boisterously and walked away, vanishing within the surrounding mist. I woke up in the shadowy living room that felt unfamiliar, even though all the furniture was in its proper place. Still groggy, I went outside to sit on the porch, careful to pull down the folded lawn chair from the top of the junk pile so as not to move or disturb anything. I could only sit there on that cluttered porch and think back to that time before Will's brother left. The times I saw him working on that junker car he had put together the last 2 years. The window rattling woofers from his car's sound system every time he got home from school, or even the times Will and I would wrestle him in the yard and he'd pin me down, grinning above me, his muscular frame taut and his warm fingers digging into my shoulders while Will tried his best to pry him off of me. I wanted to go to Will's, not to talk to Will or anyone in his family, only to look through the show window to make sure the stars still had been blue, as if it would have automatically turned to gold and have told me everything I ever wanted to know about the nature of dreams. I had wanted to go but remained sitting there on the porch steps. The air became heavier and even suffocating. I tried to cry, but my eyes were empty. I then felt years older, no longer wanting to go over to Will's again or even go back inside. I just sat on that wobbly lawn chair surrounded by the junk that seemed mountainous next to me. I only stared through the screen door out to the black road that somehow appeared even darker in that spring dawn. The next day, with the help of my mom, I finally got my bike put together. Days later, I heard the news that the Humvee Will's brother had been in rolled over an IED and he was now paralyzed from the waist down. Since his return, I only saw him one afternoon when I rode my bike over to Will's. He sat alone on the porch in his wheelchair. When I said hi, he only looked up at me, grinning, and then laughed. I backed away and then turned around while he continued to guffaw. I walked my bike back home while mostly looking down at the road ahead of me. When I reached the front porch, I tossed it on top of the junk pile where it remains till this day.